Ladies and gentlemen, we're about to begin. And here we go. Are we good to go, guys? All right. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Global Breakthrough Energy Movement Conference 2016. This is the first day, and we are going to be starting our afternoon session. Leading us off today is going to be Ken Rohla. Ken's a personal friend of mine. We met several years back at some of the ORMUS alchemy conferences. He works with the ORMUS and etheric elements and combining them to create organite and work with the subtle energies for healing, health, technologies, growing plants, and a bunch of other subtle energies and dynamic processes that he's going to be presenting on today. So I'd like you to give a warm welcome to Ken Rohla.
Hey everybody, you ready to party? You ready to party? All right, let's ditch this joint and go then. No, I tell you, I appreciate everything the GlobalBEM folks have done. They always attract the best speakers, and that's why I come. So anyway, really, truly, you know, it's like when they ask me, I just say, yeah, absolutely, because I know they're going to have an amazing lineup of people. So anyway, yes, my name is Ken Rohla. I'm from the Daytona Beach, Florida area. And if you guys want to know more about me, you can check out my website, my bio at freshandalive.com. So let me get this thing started here. Okay, there I am. So I'm going to be talking about new frontiers in healing with ORMUS and scalar energy. And I'm going to be going fast because I like to throw a lot of information in that you guys can actually use. I'm very solutions oriented, and so you probably will have a hard time keeping up with me if you're taking notes, so don't worry. You can go to my website and download these slides at downloads.freshandalive.com. Now, first of all, disclaimer, anything that I talk about in this presentation, please don't construe this as any kind of medical or health advice. This is just me sharing my ideas and opinions with you. The FDA wouldn't like it very much if you actually used any of this stuff, so please don't. Please always do what the FDA says and make sure that you always use a licensed healthcare practitioner when dealing with your health. So, you really, don't take my advice. I'm telling you right now, don't take my advice. All right, so what is ORMUS? For those of you that aren't familiar with this, it seems like a lot of people have heard the term and they're kind of familiar with it, but it's kind of like this nebulous thing and it sounds magical, some of the things that people say about it. But basically, ORMUS elements are they're actually very ancient. They're not newly discovered. I'd say they're newly discovered in the United States and in modern science, maybe in the cutting edge of science. But basically, they're simply certain minerals that exist on the periodic chart, the platinum group metals, gold, silver, mercury, copper, that can exist as individual atoms rather than atoms connected together. Now, that sounds very simple, but that has a lot of very profound implications. Normally, all these elements are metals, and as metals, they are crystalline, which means that their atoms are attached to each other in some kind of three-dimensional grid pattern. And that's what makes them metallic looking, that's what gives them their hardness and their structure. Well, you can send them through certain processes and actually break them apart into individual atoms, which according to conventional physics is impossible. And yet it happens, and you can do this yourself. And when you do this, these atoms become a completely different form. They look like white ceramic powders, as you can see here in this picture. All these different metals, whether it's copper, silver, gold, mercury, or whatever, they all become white ceramic powders when they're in this state. They have really weird physics. They're superconductors, but what makes them really weird is that they're actually interdimensional or multidimensional matter. They're not conventional matter the way we think of it. Part of the matter is this three-dimensional mineral that we see in our 3D reality, but the majority of it is actually existing simultaneously in other frequencies or dimensions of time and space. And so this gives them very special properties. They're really weird. They connect different frequencies or dimensions of time, space-time, to our 3D reality, and therefore we can use them in some very interesting ways. Now, you would think, that ingesting mercury, for example, we know ingesting mercury is very, very toxic, but in these monoatomic forms, these elements become extremely rejuvenative and regenerative to living organisms. So you can make them in certain ways, particularly in natural ways, and they can have extremely powerful healing effects and regenerative effects. And as more and more healers and supplement companies and inventors are figuring this stuff out, they're coming out with more and more supplements and technologies that utilize ORMUS elements in them, and that's what I'm going to be talking about today. Now, let's see here. Let me find my little remote. There we go. So there are a lot of really interesting applications with these ORMUS elements, from space and time travel because they're interdimensional. I have met scientists who actually worked on projects making anti-gravity time-traveling flying saucers, where they would coat the surfaces of a saucer and use a device like a Searle effect generator type device to create a singularity or a black hole and enlarge it up around the spacecraft and actually be able to blink a spacecraft out of our 3D reality and have it show up somewhere else in time and space. So that's one application. There are applications I'm going to be showing you today in agriculture. I don't think any of you guys probably are working on an anti-gravity flying saucer right now, so I'm not going to bother getting into that. But we will get into applications for healing in agriculture. And materials engineering, there are some really interesting uses in that as well. So how is this stuff, where does this stuff come from, first of all, and how is it created? Well, in nature, it's all around. It's very abundant in nature, especially here in Texas. There's a lot of these monoatomic elements, these ORMUS elements, in soil. And by the way, I forgot to mention that, let me back up a little bit. The ORMUS, ORMES, or ORMUS is simply an acronym for orbitally rearranged monoatomic elements. So that's just a fancy acronym that a man named David Hudson came up with to describe these very interesting elements. So they can be created alchemically, and this is what David Hudson and others have been teaching. And as a matter of fact, our good buddy Vernon Roth here today has some amazing ORMUS products, and I don't know if I would classify them as alchemical. I think they are, really. But he has a very, very unique process for making his, and his are some of the very, very few that I actually like to use and recommend. But at any rate, you can make them alchemically using processes with, for example, mixing sea salt with lye and water and sending it through certain processes and extracting out a precipitate, which you can then, some people will ingest it. I feed it to plants or microbes. I don't ingest it directly. And usually I don't recommend that because most of the ones that I've come across are toxic, either with heavy metals, or they also have some negative side effects, because when you ingest these things, because they're superconducting, they'll actually plug into the body and raise the superconductivity in the body artificially, and then you wind up manifesting things you didn't intend. And we're going to talk about how that happens. But at any rate, most alchemical ORMUS products, I don't recommend people ingesting them, but they're great usually to feed to plants and ferments. They're also made by microbial action in the soil. Obviously, plants can't suck boulders up through their roots, so they like to eat little tiny particles of minerals called angstrom particles, which are just a few atoms of a mineral bundled into a particle, or individual atoms, which are the monoatomics. And there are things that you can do to feed the soil to increase the level of monoatomics in your soil, and when you do that, you get insane growth. Insane growth. Like here in Texas, I know of a company, which unfortunately I can't name because they've had attempts on their life actually, that developed a product for agriculture that you can put on the soil and it will break the minerals down into monoatomic and angstrom particles extremely well. And they did field trials in Texas where you've got a lot of these minerals in the soil, but they're not very bioavailable. And they did a field trial at a tomato farm. They were getting tomato plants 15 feet tall with 3,000 to 4,000 nutrient-dense tomatoes per vine. And not some kind of crazy chemical abomination, but like a real healthy, strong tomato plant, nutrient dense. There are also, when you feed these ORMUS elements to GMO crops, it will actually unwind their DNA and revert them back to heirlooms, which we're going to talk a little bit more about. So there's some really useful things you can do if you know about ORMUS, and it's really easy to make. So microbe action in soil is one way. You can feed microbes to the soil to increase that. You can also use volcanic rock powders, which we'll talk about more. You can make these ORMUS elements by vortexing mineral water in magnetic fields, and there's actually either ways of building your own device with a blender, or you can buy a device to do that. Photosynthesis is one of nature's greatest ways at making these ORMUS elements. So if you feed certain types of minerals to plants, they will uptake them and they will create ORMUS elements. That's one of my favorite ways of getting it, by the way. I grow a lot of my own food, and it's a great way to get these ORMUS elements that are in a format that the body understands and can utilize. And then fermentation, especially in magnetic fields. Microbes are nature's nanotech. They like to eat big things and break them down into little things, or eat toxic things and break them down into non-toxic things. And so you can actually make kraut in your kitchen, or beer, or wine, or medicines using different ferments. And you can throw rock powders, you can throw herbs into them, you can throw all kinds of things that are high in these ORMUS elements, but they're not very bioavailable. You can ferment them, and that will break them down and make them become bioavailable. And if you put these ferments inside of a magnetic field while you're doing that, which is actually really simple to do, then you can get incredible amounts of this stuff and have really amazing effects. And another source of these minerals is in volcanoes. So if you guys have ever seen you probably heard about that pesky volcano in Iceland a few years ago that was blowing ash all over Europe, and everybody was ticked off because it was interfering with the airplane flight lanes and stuff. Well, that's actually a really wonderful event for the Earth because it remineralizes the Earth, especially with these ORMUS elements, these monoatomics. But that volcano, you can actually go to YouTube and you can search on Iceland volcano lightning, and you can see video of this volcano as it's blowing, and you'll see lightning shooting up out of the volcano into the sky. And the reason that is because one of the properties of these superconducting minerals, these ORMUS elements, is that because they're superconductors, they create superconducting fields, which are known as Meissner fields, and they can generate huge amounts of energy that want to ground out. And that's exactly what goes on when these volcanoes are blowing. They're creating all this ash, all this highly monoatomic ash, and it's creating these Meissner fields that discharge, and you see all this lightning. And of course, conventional scientists are baffled. They don't understand it because they don't know about monoatomics. But that's one of the things, one of the evidences you can see of the superconductivity with these volcanic minerals. And the cool thing is, you can take these minerals and do things with them to get ORMUS into your own self. Oops. I don't know what happened there. Did I hit the wrong button? There we go. Okay. Okay, so that's a little bit about ORMUS. Now, what is scalar energy? Now, I don't really like the name scalar energy because it's kind of confusing. If you come from a science background in particular, there's scalar physics and there's scalar mathematics, and it really has nothing to do with what people are referring to of this subtle energy known as scalar energy. But Dr. Konstantin Meil from Germany has kind of popularized that phrase in certain circles, and so I kind of got hooked on it back in the day when I was listening to him. And so for argument purposes, we'll just call it scalar energy. But it's just a subtle energy that's superluminal, meaning that it travels faster than light. And it actually is light, but it travels faster than what we've been told is the speed of light. As it turns out, the speed of light is not fixed, and it's not necessarily 186,000 miles per second either. The speed of light can change, and this particular energy is photonic light energy, but it travels far beyond what we've been told is the speed of light. And it's actually kind of like the Force in Star Wars. It's really what everything in our 3D and non-physical universe is made of. It's this energy that I liken to God consciousness, and it flows through the universe, and it slows down and it coagulates into this 3D reality, this physical reality of ours. And so scientists now are seeing evidence of this. You can actually see this in mainstream physics journals where they're discovering that this superluminal light is flooding out of the centers of galaxies. This is actually an article from phys.org, which is a very mainstream physics journal, where they talk about these furious black hole winds of superluminal light. So this energy comes out of the centers of galaxies, and it's zipping out, and as it comes out, it's spiraling. It likes to spiral. It always spirals. and it's branching as it goes. So it's spiraling and it's branching as it goes. It comes zooming out of the centers of galaxies, and it follows this toroidal flow around the galaxy, which we'll show a picture of. This is another physics journal. NASA Science News. There are plenty of black holes that gobble energy. Now scientists or astronomers spotted one in a distant galaxy that's giving some of its energy back. And actually what's going on is these so-called black holes, they're actually a toroidal field. They're a donut-shaped energetic structure where energy is coming out one center of the donut and whipping around, spiraling around the donut and going back in the other side. Scientists call them black holes and white holes, but what they really are is a singularity at the center of a toroidal field. So the whole universe, as Nassim Haramein and others are pointing out, is a web of these black holes, these singularities. And these singularities are found at the centers of galaxies, they're found at the centers of suns, the centers of planets, the centers of any spinning bodies. Nassim is also saying now that protons are singularities. The whole universe is a web of these singularities. Human beings have a web of these singularities, these black holes within our bodies that correspond to what have been called the acupuncture meridians and the chakras. We'll get a little bit more into that here in a moment. But so this flow of energy is coming from the centers of galaxies, flowing outward, and it's relayed from sun to sun to sun outward to us. So ultimately it comes down to us from our sun and up from the center of the earth, because planets have these singularities at their center, these interdimensional portals for this energy. And so it's coming up from the center of the earth down from the sun, and that's why we have these practices like Qigong and Tai Chi and Ayurveda and different practices, Kundalini Yoga, where you're taking energy in from above and down from below and bringing it in and manipulating it with your mind within the body. What you're actually doing is taking this energy that creates and can alter matter, and you're using it to do exactly that, usually for improving healing and for consciousness and expanding awareness. And with amazing effect, by the way. I mean, there are people who cure incurable diseases all the time simply with meditation or yoga, things like that. So as I mentioned, these galaxies have these toroidal-shaped fields with this energy zipping around, spiraling around. And so do solar systems, so do suns, so do planets, so do human beings, so do cells, so do molecules, so do atoms, and on, and phenomena. From the microscopic to the macroscopic, we've got this web of these black holes, and each of them have these toroidal fields around them, and you can do things with them. As I mentioned, the chakras in the body, what they really are is large deposits of these ORMUS minerals along the spine. And because these ORMUS minerals are superconducting, they open up a place for the singularities to occur. So throughout the body, the acupuncture meridians, the DNA is loaded up with these ORMUS elements, the brain neural pathways are loaded up with them, the spine has these large nodes of them, and that correlates to the chakras along the spine. Now the brain is actually a scalar wave transceiver. It picks up this God consciousness flowing through the cosmos and rebroadcasts it outward and creates this local toroidal field around you. And this is how we create our reality. It's not some metaphysical metaphor. We actually put out this field. We grab this energy, or we're conduits of this energy, and we put out this field. And this is how, because this energy can be converted into matter and other types of energy that we can see and measure, this is how we create our reality. So if you understand that, this is one of the biggest secrets that the powers that be on this planet do not want us to understand. They don't want us to understand our own power, our ability to create our reality, and our ability to alter matter and alter reality, especially within our own bodies. Now, as I mentioned, the DNA is loaded with these ORMUS elements, and it gives the DNA superconducting properties. And so this is how consciousness meets the physical body. When you hear doctors talk about the mind-body connection, well, if there really is a mind-body connection, then there has to be a mechanism for it. And that mechanism is in the DNA. The DNA is a superconducting antenna, and it is the interface, or one of the interfaces, I should say, for consciousness and the physical body. Now, crystals also contain these monoatomic ORMUS elements in them. They're hiding within, and again, you have to understand that when you analyze elements, to see if you can find these ORMUS elements in them. In conventional analysis techniques, they don't show up because they're this metamatter, and they actually collapse into other forms. They collapse into other elements. So in analysis like spectroscopy, for example, which is kind of like the acid test to determine what something's made of, these ORMUS elements don't show up because they collapse into other elements. And so they don't show up as monoatomic gold or whatever. But they're hiding within crystals, and this is what gives crystals the piezoelectric effect. For you geeks out there, you physics or engineering geeks, the piezoelectric effect is simply the ability for a crystal to emit electricity. You know, when you have a gas grill, for example, and you've got the little red button and you push it, the button on the gas grill to ignite the grill, what it's doing is smacking a little piece of quartz crystal that's connected to two wires, and it shoots out electricity and makes it spark and fire your grill up. So that's the piezoelectric effect. Well, it turns out if you squeeze on a crystal instead of smacking it, it will put out scalar waves, and you can do some very interesting things with it. Now, the ancients observed this. This is nothing new to humanity. The ancients have known about this for, as long as we've been around, and they observed it in nature. They observed it, for example, in eggs. The egg form is very, very conducive to the living organism, the growing living organism inside of it. And it's because the shape combined with the fact that this bone, this calcium that an egg is made of, is high in monoatomic elements. So what you've got is a superconducting antenna that directs this God consciousness flowing through the cosmos in concentrated doses into the inside of that egg form. So the ancients noticed this, and they started building devices and things to mimic that. And that's why you see the Greek amphoras, for example, that have this egg shape for storing food and water. Or kimchi pots, for example. Kimchi pots and the old amphoras, they were made out of high ORMUS soil. Soil that's high in these volcanic minerals in this egg form that concentrates, just like an egg, it concentrates life force inside the vessel. Then in the case of kimchi, the traditional kimchi pots are always made out of specific clay, and they bury it in the ground for several months. It goes through several different astrological cycles. A lot of this knowledge has been lost in modern times, but the ancients knew to put this stuff in the ground at certain times when the moon and the sun were in certain positions, to leave it in the ground for a certain period of time before pulling it out. And then what happens is you get much higher levels of nutrients and much more digestible food. Well, Rudolf Steiner noted this as well, and he developed a method that's now used in biodynamic farming where, for example, when I was first introduced to this years ago, I was, out of engineering school, but I wasn't aware of any of this stuff. I thought it was absolute nonsense. Some guy showed me, he took a 5-gallon bucket of water, he put some cow poop in it from a cow horn, stirred it up with his hand, and stirred it and vortexed it in one direction for a while, and then he would reverse and vortex in the other direction. He said, now if you put this on your crops, it'll make them grow better. And I thought he was totally insane. But it turns out he was correct, because I didn't understand the very advanced physics involved in it. But Rudolf Steiner figured out that with chemical farming, this was back in the early 1900s, even then, it was obvious to him that chemical farming was going to destroy so much soil that we wouldn't have enough compost to go around to heal it all back and bring it back. So he developed these homeopathic methods for healing soil by taking cow poop and stuffing it in a cow horn and burying it underground for a full year. And then you dig it out and you take it and you put it into water and you vortex the water for a certain period of time in one direction then the other direction. And then you take that and dilute it and you spray it on large amounts of land. And it will radically improve the land because it accelerates microbe growth in the soil, which breaks down toxins, which improves nutrient levels, et cetera, et cetera. And so it really does work. And so when you understand the physics, this makes a lot more sense. This is actually a picture of a traditional preparation of what they call Steiner preps, where you take these cow horns, and again, these horns are Fibonacci curved. They're sacred geometrically curved horns made out of high ORMUS material. So you've got a superconducting cone in a Fibonacci curve that focuses energy into the inside of the horn, which, by the way, the reason horns are shaped the way they are and animals have them is because it's an antenna for them. That's why deer and horned animals are so sensitive to what's around them. They have to be. They have to know what predators are going to be around them. So you've got this superconducting antenna that's directing all this energy, this life force energy, into the inside of it. You stuff it full of cow poop, which is a probiotic mineral supplement, basically. You let it sit for a year. The Earth goes through the full astrological or astronomical cycle and all these different energies. One of the things I didn't mention is that these ORMUS elements, because they're superconductors, they're extremely sensitive to fields. So they can pick up the electromagnetic and scalar energies coming from many, many, many light years away in our cosmos. So when they're in the ground, they act like antennas in the ground, and they capture this cosmic energy and bring it into the soil and create fields within the soil that are very, very beneficial to living organisms, including microbes and earthworms and plants. So when you put them in these horns, you've got this perfect curve. The microbes eat up the cow poop, and what you're left with is a high ORMUS mineral, very, very dense ORMUS mineral supplement, which you can then put into water. And then when you vortex it, especially if you vortex it in a magnetic field, you'll make the ORMUS even more bioavailable. And then when you feed it to crops and soil, makes the microbes happy. They grow bigger. They eat more rocks, break them down into more bioavailable particle sizes, and the plants can uptake them, and then they're much healthier. Now, the ancients, again, they observed this. They were very observant of what was going on in nature. They were probably having help from extraterrestrials as well. And they noticed that volcanic mountains put off these vortexes. There are stories of shamans and medicine people who could feel the energies in different power spots, and they could identify them. They would mark them. And, of course, archaeologists and paleontologists find these stones marked in certain ways, and they don't have an explanation for why they were marked. But they marked stones, and they marked places that were high in these superconducting elements that put off these scalar fields and vortexes. So this is a picture of Mount Shasta in California, and I had a friend who gave me this picture, and she said, "Oh my God, there's UFOs over Mount Shasta." And I said, well, there may be UFOs over Mount Shasta, but that's not why those clouds are shaped that way. That's the scalar wave vortexes coming off of the mountain that's spiraling upward like an upside-down tornado of energy, and it's slicing up the clouds into those shapes. And that's exactly what's going on. You've got this singularity at the center of the Earth that's emanating all this scalar energy, and it's in a geometric pattern. This singularity at the center of the Earth is shaped like a crystal. It's like a very complex cubic octahedron, for those of you that are following Nassim Haramein. And these vortices of energy come out of the apexes of that geometry and shoot out to the surface of the Earth. These volcanic mountains capture it. They're like the chakras of the Earth. They capture it, and then they spin these vortexes up out through them. And the types of minerals that they're made of are oscillators. Crystals are all oscillators. So you put energy in one frequency, it comes out the other side a different frequency. So these mountains are oscillators. They put out certain frequencies that are harmonious to living organisms. And then the rotation of the Earth combined with the gravitational field drags them down across the surface of the Earth. So you've got these spiraling vortexes going along the surface of the Earth, and that is what people call the ley lines. So if you're living in proximity to a ley line or one of these mountains, you're going to see the animals and the plants grow healthier, and therefore, normally, the people are going to be healthier as well. And again, the ancients noticed this, so they started mimicking it by making their own artificial mountains. And that's exactly what pyramids are. Pyramids are scalar wave antennas. They're transceivers. They pick up this energy coming from the sun and from the center of the Earth, and they rebroadcast it outward in a toroidal field around them, and then they create a vortex of scalar waves that go up out of the tip. And it has all kinds of very beneficial uses that way. This is actually a Curlian photograph of the energy coming off the tip of a pyramid, and you can see it's a double helix. Wonder why our DNA is shaped the way it is. You see evidence of this everywhere you go. This manifestation of this spiraling, vortexing energy coagulating, slowing down and coagulating into our 3D reality. Out here in the lobby, there's actually a picture. It's actually a kind of a picture sculpture of the Colorado River here in Texas and all the tributaries. And if you look at it, it's winding back and forth. It's horseshoeing back and forth, almost bending back onto itself. And the reason is because that water wants to flow in a vortex. It's following the natural flow or the motion of the planets and the solar system and the entire galaxy is in motion. Nothing's sitting still. Our sun isn't like sitting out here in space doing nothing and all the planets are rotating around it. That's not how it is. The sun is spiraling around through the galaxy and we're spiraling around it. And so that spiraling motion makes the energy and water want to spiral. So because that water is nailed to the ground by gravitation, instead of spiraling, it just wiggles back and forth in these horseshoe patterns. So that's all fine and dandy. That's ORMUS, that's scalar energy. So what? What can you do with it, right? It's like, well, this is nice. I'm going to go home and kick the dog and drink a beer, right? Well, there's a lot of cool things you can do with this, but if you don't understand these fundamentals, it'll be like it was for me 30 years ago, thinking this is all a bunch of New Age nonsense. One of the applications that I'm a real big fan of is a quantum biofeedback device, as they're known, called the QXCI SCIO, or its newer cousin, the Indigo. And this device, basically, it's a combination of computer software and an interface and some straps that you hook up to your ankles and your wrists and your forehead. And it can actually read the scalar energetic signature of the matter in your body and compare it with a database of known values that it has, and then it can tell what's going on within your body. Now, you have to understand that all the elements on the periodic chart, and this is conventional physics, this isn't even anything extravagant, it's known that every element has, in its subatomic structure, it vibrates. And each element vibrates at a different frequency. So, for example, hydrogen vibrates at a certain frequency. Oxygen vibrates at a certain frequency. If you combine two hydrogens and an oxygen atom together, it's going to have an overall frequency, and you can measure that and understand that's water. And so this is how the SCIO works. It basically looks at different levels of granularity within the body at the scalar vibrational frequencies of things, and it can identify if you've got heavy metals or toxins or parasites or pathogens or emotional issues with your parents or whatever. It's crazy what this thing can read. It can even detect ghosts in the room, believe it or not. And it's because emotions, human emotion and consciousness is a form of scalar energy. It's really just God consciousness. It's kind of localized. It's flowing through everything. We capture it, we use it, and we create our own little reality with it. But this is how this device is able to do some amazing things. It's not FDA approved as a diagnostic device, but I do use it an awful lot for screening. You can do things, for example, like test supplements, and you can actually use it to figure out what dosages of specific supplements are right for you, or if the supplement's not right for you. So I do that a lot when I'm doing testing of supplements. Other things you can do with this energy, I actually make devices that utilize this energy for different purposes. Years ago, when I was making fermented foods, and I also would make these fermented brews using a product called Effective Microorganisms, and I started realizing, like, wow, I can do all these other things that haven't been done with fermentation. And one of them is putting the ferment in a scalar energy field. So I started learning about Organite, and Organite is a material basically that has some kind of non-conducting resin or substrate, like fiberglass resin or plastic or glass or something. And it has crystals in it, it has metal particles in it. And there are several different effects that occur with that. Basically, crystals themselves, as I mentioned, because they have these monoatomics in them, they put out scalar waves all the time. They're like antennas for it. And if you squeeze on them, they'll put out even more because of the piezoelectric effect. But then also there's something called the Casimir effect. And when you put two plates of metal very close together, like a 1/16 of an inch apart from each other, they'll generate a charge, but they'll also generate scalar waves. And the people that are making Organite, even Carl Hans Wells, who invented Organite, and Wilhelm Reich, who really is probably the modern inventor of this technology, they didn't understand the physics of this. That they just were kind of mimicking what they observed. But the Casimir effect will create scalar waves. So when you put particles close together, you're going to get surface area close enough together that you're going to get some of the Casimir effect. So the finer the particles, the more the Casimir effect you're going to get. So I started making these discs to put off scalar fields, and then I would put fermentation buckets on them, and it would radically increase the nutrient levels and the ferment time. It would speed up the ferment time quite a bit. So I developed a large disc, and I put it under 5-gallon buckets to do this. Well, people started wanting to buy them, and so I started selling them to people, and then they started using them for all kinds of crazy stuff I never imagined. They were sleeping with them and putting them in their refrigerators and growing plants with them and all kinds of crazy stuff. So I figured out that there's a lot of other things we can do with this. And so now I make these discs and I sell them. And I was already making a little powered scalar wave device that you can carry with you for protection against jet lag and EMF, and it would also help you get into deep sleep states. And so I started applying all these different things I was learning from making these discs and other things I was learning about, and developed a pyramid that's a powered scalar wave generator that will put out a field and scalar waves, and it'll help you get into deep sleep, and it'll protect against EMF and do all kinds of strange things. And other people have been doing this as well. There are people making organite cones and pyramids, and you can actually take little small pyramids or cones just like 6 inches tall, stick them outdoors, and they will actually clear chemtrails out of the sky, and they'll balance the weather if you build them right. You don't have to build a gigantic pyramid. You can just make these little tiny pyramids. Actually, here in the Bastrop area, there's a guy named Dowan Gardner. He goes by the handle of Organite Austin because he lives in Austin. He's been making really good organite and spreading it around and is doing some really good things to protect this area. That's one of his pyramids down there in the bottom. I wound up developing a powered scalar wave device that'll actually clear a 75-mile radius of nuclear fallout and chemtrails and balance the weather. It'll stop hurricanes, it'll stop severe weather, it'll stop droughts, it'll stop floods, it stops all that stuff. And of course, I got too public with it and started having death threats and stuff. And I had worked with free energy back in the early 90s, and so I've had friends murdered and hurt and things like that. So I know to take these threats seriously, so I don't get too public with it anymore. Now, Dr. Alexander Golod, who has impeccable credentials, he works for the Russian military, high level in the Russian military, and when the Cold War warmed up a little bit or eased off a little bit, he started working with pyramids. Presumably, the government probably wanted him to understand them for warfare purposes, but being a benevolent person, he started studying them for beneficial purposes and discovered all kinds of amazing things. They can make oil wells flow faster and flow better and produce more. They can clean up pollution in the ground and groundwater, including radioactivity. They can clean up radioactivity in the atmosphere and air pollution in the atmosphere. They can stop severe weather. They can even stop earthquakes. These are people sitting inside of his large pyramid outside of Moscow, and it's made completely out of non-conducting materials. With scalar waves, electrically non-conducting materials are best to work with for creating these kinds of structures. You can do it with metals, but you have to know what you're doing. They act more like waveguides. So anyway, these are people sitting inside and getting healed. They found that people could go inside the pyramid and get healed of major diseases. And these big domes, or these big globes here, those are made of crystal. They discovered also you can charge crystals. You can put crystals in the pyramid, charge them up, and then they can take them out and give them to people, and they will emanate this scalar energy and heal people. Now, there are a lot of really cool benefits from his pyramids, and we'll just get into a few of them. There's so many, I don't have time to list them all, but as I mentioned, neutralizes radioactivity in the atmosphere and in groundwater. It cleans up toxins in the air and in the groundwater. It increases yields of seeds and crops, reduces seismic activity. What it does is it releases the tectonic shifts little by little every day instead of letting them build up into big shifts, and that way you don't have big earthquakes. Now, they noticed a lot of springs popping up all around Golod's pyramid for miles around, and it's because when you understand these ORMUS elements are in soil, they're actually made by microbes eating rocks in the soil, but they're trapped in the soil, so they can't levitate. They're anti-gravitational. That's one of their properties, and they want to levitate up, but they can't. The soil holds them down. So what happens is rainwater will wash through the soil and wash them down into aquifers, and when they've accumulated enough, the anti-gravitational properties will levitate the water up to the surface. That's how spring water gets to the surface most of the time. It's usually not hydrostatic pressure. It's the ORMUS levitating it up to the surface. That's how you have springs at the top of 13,000-foot high mountains. You know, how does water get up to the top of a 13,000-foot high mountain? How does water get up to the top of a 400-foot tall tree. You know, the redwoods in California, how does that water get up there? If you know anything about physics, you can't pump water, or you can't suck water up that high. The trees do a combination of bubbling CO2 that they absorb in their veins, in their capillaries, and bubbling the water up. It also is the ORMUS elements levitating it up to the plant. Now, the cool benefit of Golad's pyramid, and this gives me hope for humanity, is that there were some flowers they noticed growing out in the fields around his pyramid. If you recall in that picture, there were these big fields around this big pyramid. And they noticed some flowers no one had ever seen before, so they called a botanist in to have them identified, and they discovered they've been extinct on Earth for 11 million years. And so Golad theorized that these pyramids, this pyramid energy, can capture the patterns of things from other times and places and bring them into our present. And some people call it the Akashic Records. He calls it the quantum field, I believe. But these things can bring, if these things can bring extinct species back onto the planet, think about all the things we've wiped off the planet that we could bring back. Now, there are people making and selling Organite all over the place, and I'll tell you the truth, most of it, probably 95% of it, is not that well built. Some of it's just outright junk that doesn't work. But there are some people that have, are making good stuff. This was a pyramid I saw on eBay that I thought was pretty cool, and it's bound to work quite well the way it's constructed. And this is one of those cases where they're using metals in the construction, and they know what they're doing, and this thing probably really does an amazing job of keeping chemtrails out of the sky and balancing the weather and probably other things, improving plant growth in the area. I noticed when I put my device outside in my yard, I've got about 5 acres. I'm in Florida where we've got a lot of molds on everything, plants and all kinds of stuff. And I noticed after a few months of putting it out that the molds went away, which I found quite interesting. But at any rate, you basically, at the corners of this pyramid at the bottom, you've got this little piece of Organite at each corner that generates these scalar waves, sends them up through the tubes, because these waves are vortexing through the tubes, and then it goes up and hits the Organite at the top, and then it comes out and vortexes into a big, strong vortex. Now, the thing of it is, human beings can do this. Our biology can do this ourselves. You can actually do this yourself. You can go out into your yard and meditate and envision creating a vortex of energy and clearing the chemtrails or changing the weather. You can actually, I was out the other day with a gardener, and we were making clouds dissolve just by directing our consciousness at it. It's because we are scalar wave transceivers. We take this energy and we can broadcast it. This is why native peoples throughout the world, throughout history, have gotten together in circles and done ceremony. They may not know all the physics. They just know, for example, a rain dance or a rain ceremony. You get into a circle and you get a bunch of human beings generating scalar vortexes, and then that will combine to create one big vortex. It goes up into the atmosphere, and it acts like a vacuum cleaner. It actually changes the ionization of the atmosphere. It's like an upside-down tornado of this subtle energy. And it goes up, and if you've got a big enough group, you create this vortex where the apex of it is out in space. And so it's sitting there vortexing with the big end of the vortex down toward the ground, and the point out in space acts like a vacuum cleaner, pulls the pollution out, balances the ionization of the atmosphere, and then you get whatever you need in terms of weather. If you need rain, if there's been a drought, you get rain, but you get enough, you don't get too much. If it's been flooding and raining too much, or strong winds or whatever, it just goes away. And I've seen this over and over and over again. So we don't have to have these technologies outside of ourselves. They just make it more convenient, because who's got the time to sit out in your yard and meditate all day? Especially with all the spraying that's going on. Now, there's some really cool supplements. This is starting to get into the very cutting-edge supplement companies like Ancient Tech. Vernon Ross' company, he's been doing this for eons. I mean, Vernon knew this stuff probably back in 1950-11. Before anybody else did, because his ORMES products are some of the first I came across, and they're actually some of the very, very few that I like and recommend. But this one is a really interesting iodine supplement from Dr. Gabriel Cousins at the Tree of Life Rejuvenation Center in Arizona. And it is monoatomic iodine, but he didn't just stop with that. They actually use a scalar device to program it with the anti-frequencies of all known radioactive elements. So this iodine, because it's superconducting, Not only when you ingest it will it give you iodine and help your thyroid and help your body, but also it emanates the anti-frequencies, scalar frequencies of radiation, and it will actually neutralize radioactivity in the body. Now, they can't claim that, and I'm not claiming that. I'm just telling you this is what my experience has been in using this stuff. Scalar energy, because it creates and alters matter, it can do all kinds of interesting things, and it can neutralize radioactivity. That device I told you about called the SCIO and the indigo, those devices can neutralize radioactivity in the body. And I know that firsthand because a little over a year ago, I got radiation poisoning for the first time. I've had it 3 times now. You know, nobody's going to, I wouldn't volunteer for radiation poisoning, so Spirit kind of sends me that way, and then I have to deal with it and figure it out, and then I share it with people. So I got radiation poisoning the first time, and it was pretty bad, and I had to figure out really quick what to do. And fortunately, I was already doing a lot of it I didn't even know, because I was testing some new supplements, and it turns out those supplements pulled it out of my body. But in the process, I found out that the SCIO and the indigo, I actually got hooked up to one, and in 3 hours it neutralized the radioactivity in my body, which is pretty amazing. And then I found out about this. 3 days later, I'm talking to Gabriel Cousins, and this is kind of how my life works. I swear, I feel like Forrest Gump sometimes, because it's like when you're living in line with the way nature is and works, it's a lot easier and things fall in your lap. And so I kind of have gotten accustomed to that. You know, I mean, like I said, I wouldn't go volunteer for radiation poisoning, but when that happens, it's like the answers come. And so this was one of them. 3 days later, I'm talking to him on the phone, and he says, oh yeah, we've got this two amazing supplements that will pull this stuff out of the body. This is one of them. The other one is a really, really cool water. It's actually an ORMUS water. This is just water with monoatomic something in it. I don't know exactly because it's proprietary and they won't tell me, but it's some kind of ORMUS water that has been programmed with the anti-frequencies of all known radioactive elements, and it does the same thing. You take like 12 drops a day of this stuff, and it will remove radiation from the body. It's quite amazing. And again, I know this firsthand because I used this stuff and it worked for me, and I've used it on other people and tested them. The SCIO and indigo, by the way, will test for radioactivity in the body. Although if you go to a practitioner and ask for that, I mean, you know, they're going to throw all kinds of disclaimers at you because that's not a diagnostic device. Now, our good buddy, our 10-4 good buddy, Vernon Roth, as I mentioned, he's got some really amazing products, and I was telling him a little while ago. I met Vernon in 2005 at the ORMES conference in Enota, Georgia. And I was actually disappointed in the conference, and I was leaving, and I came in to say goodbye to a friend of mine, and as I'm sitting there, Vernon is up on stage talking, and as I'm talking, saying goodbye, I'm hearing what he's saying. I was like, holy crap, who is this guy? He's saying the same stuff I've been saying for years. Oh, Vernon Roth. And so I listened, and it's like, man, this guy is speaking my language. So when he got done talking, I came down, and we talked a bit. Well, I had already gone to his booth and bought some of his Spark of Life water. And, you know, especially back then, I didn't read labels. I just, you know, do whatever. So I bought a couple of his bottles. I threw it in my bag. And then later that night, I went back to my campsite because I was camping. And I didn't have any lights. So I sat and had dinner in the dark. And I figured, well, I'll pull out some of that ORMUS water and drink it for, you know, dinner. So it was a quart bottle of the ORMUS water. So I drank the whole quart. Well, first thing to happen when I opened the bottle up and I brought it to my lips, when it got about an inch away, this spark came shooting out of the bottle and arced across like an inch from the bottle and zapped the heck out of my lip. So, and it was so bright, it lit up the whole campsite. It was hilarious. I was like, oh my God, I know this stuff is good. So then I ate my sandwich and I drank the whole bottle. And then, you know, like 11 o'clock at night, I go to bed, and I was wide awake, totally wide awake. Like, I started seeing patterns in the universe I'd never seen before. I was starting to, like, solve all the problems in the universe, and I stayed up all night. I wasn't tired at all. I went to the conference the next day. I was there all day long, felt great, wasn't tired at all. So I stayed like 48 hours, maybe more, straight after drinking this bottle. So I'm at the conference the next day, and I said to Vernon, I said, man, what the hell is this water? And I told him what I did. He's like, oh my God, you're only supposed to take like, what, 2 tablespoons or something. So I learned, but I don't know what he's got some kind of magical machine, and God knows what else he's doing. But he's got some really amazing stuff. I've done cleanses with his ORMUS gold and platinum and other things, and it's really amazing. And he was telling me just a little while ago, you can also feed the gold to sprouts and to plants. So I'm going to play with that next. I already do feed ORMUS to my plants and my sprouts. I grow a lot of my own food, and I'm going to show you guys some of that. But Ancient Tech has some of the very few ORMUS supplements that I recommend. And ancienttech.com. Unabashed plug for Vernon, because I don't mind plugging people's stuff. If it works, I don't plug stuff that doesn't work. People that know me know that. Now, the cool thing is you can create your own too, and this is what I teach people. One of the ways you can create ORMUS is by vortexing water with mineral water in scalar fields and magnetic fields. And if you think about it, when water is flowing over stream and riverbeds, it's flowing over rocks, and it's creating vortexes, and it's getting imbued with minerals. But the rocks are made of crystals, and they're sitting out in the sun, and they're absorbing the scalar energy coming from the sun and from the center of the earth all day, all night, 24/7, and imparting those frequencies into the rocks, which they emanate outwards. And then they're oscillators, so they're changing the frequency to these natural frequencies, and then the water's flowing over it. Well, water is a homeopathic solution. It's a liquid crystal. And the molecules of the water will cluster together into patterns depending on what it's been exposed to, material-wise and also energetically. So natural water that's clean, that's been flowing over these rocks, it's picking up these scalar frequencies. Very often the rocks are magnetic, so it's getting magnetically charged, which changes the water clustering and makes it very, very beneficial for living organisms. So you can do the same thing. You can actually go online, just Google magnetic blender, and you can see how to buy some magnets, stick them on, slap them on your blender with a little Velcro or elastic, and you can make a vortex machine, which you can put mineral water or anything else into with food in it, vortex it, and it will increase the ORMUS. It'll liberate the ORMUS elements in the food or water. And so I do this all the time. I'll vortex water with sea minerals in it, feed it to my plants, feed it to my ferments, and you get crazy growth. If you don't want to mess with that, you can buy one. There's actually a device called a water vitalizer, and the people that make this, they don't even know how it works. I talked to the inventor of it, and I was talking to him about ORMUS and this energy, and he had no clue. All he knows is, I think he was imitating Victor Schauberger's work, and he just knows it works. He doesn't really understand the physics of it. But basically what it does, the base creates a very strong magnetic field, and then it vortexes the water. And so if it's got minerals in there, it will break the minerals down into angstrom and monoatomic particles, and you wind up with ORMUS water. And it's and it also oxygenates the water at a chemical level, so you get very, very regenerative water. That's all I drink these days. There's also a really cool product called Accelerated Silver from folks in California, acceleratedhealthproducts.com. This is unlike any colloidal or angstrom or ionic silver products out there. And there are some good ones. For those of you that are, there's a lot of confusion about silver products. People argue back and forth on the internet about, no, colloidal's better, no, ionic's better, no, this nano's better. Blah, blah, blah. People are mislabeling these silver solutions. So you can't really pay attention to what they're calling it. You have to look at what the particle sizes are. Do they have angstrom particles? Do they have monoatomic particles? This stuff is a hydrosol, and it has a high degree of monoatomic silver in it. And it's absolutely amazing for killing pathogens in the body. I always travel this. I always travel with a first aid kit of things that will kill bugs and pathogens and pull toxins out of the body in case I encounter, biowarfare bugs or radiation. Like on planes, the levels of radioactivity up in airplanes is very high. Dr. Patrick Flanagan, for those of you that know him from Phi Sciences, he's got like a $20,000 Geiger counter. He's been traveling around the world measuring radioactivity around the world. He said it's everywhere. It's even in the southern hemisphere, and it's very, very high in the upper atmosphere where planes fly. And so if you're flying, I highly recommend using these products to pull radiation out of your body. Take them before you go, take them while you're flying, and take them when you're done. for a period of time to keep this stuff out of your body. But this is really, really good stuff. I'll take a swig of it. If I travel somewhere and I start feeling a sore throat or something coming on, I'll just take a swig of this stuff. They have like, I don't know, a teaspoon or a tablespoon or whatever. I just kick it back. 5 minutes later, sore throat gone, and I just move on. Now, for radioactive particles that are what are called the transuranic elements, the ones from uranium on up on the periodic chart, their particle sizes are too large for zeolites to pull out. We haven't gotten to zeolites yet, I don't think. I should have put the zeolite slide before this. But anyway, so these larger radioactive elements, you can get them out of the gut by using clays. And there's bentonite clay, which is available in most health food stores. There's different kinds of clay. Sacred clay is one of my favorites because it's very high in ORMUS and it pulls these things out. So you take a tablespoon or two in water, you drink it, you do this, and it'll help get this stuff and other toxins and pathogens out of the gut too. Now, our good friend Mary Jane actually is very high in ORMUS. And you can actually buy marijuana legally in all 50 states now. But they don't call it marijuana anymore because that's politically very incorrect. It's even getting a little bit incorrect to call it hemp anymore because the FDA is really cracking down on hemp producers, even though it's completely legal to produce and sell the hemp that they're selling. It has almost no THC in it whatsoever. It's like the legal limit, I think, is 0.03% THC, which is what gets you high in marijuana. So they've developed strains of marijuana now that have 0.02% THC in it, which is barely detectable. It doesn't get you high, and it's completely legal in all 50 states now. So you can buy this stuff. My favorites are hemppaste.com and Charlotte's Web Botanicals, cwbotanicals.com, hemp oil and hemp paste. The hemp paste and oil are very different. The hemp paste is very strong. Like for me, I use it actually for getting really good sleep. Now, I already get good sleep normally, but if I'm on the road or doing something unusual, I'll bring hemp paste with me because I can take it 2 hours before bed and man, I'm out. And then the next day I'm like, Mr. Mellow, totally mellow, dude. It really is. It's a great thing. Now, I don't know about you guys, but back when I was young, I was a volumetric drinker, and I had a friend from 7th grade on who his sister married a smuggler, so I had access to all the drugs and pot and stuff I wanted. So I did a lot of drugs when I was young. I did inhale quite a lot. And I can tell you, it will mellow you out. But it's really cool to, especially if you're a type A personality, I'm not saying I am, but, you take some of this stuff, you don't get high, but you get mellow. And you don't get like dysfunctionally mellow to where you just don't feel like going to work today, dude. But it just chills you out. It gives you a smoothness, a calmness. It relaxes you. It's really nice. So this stuff is great, and you can do things with it. You can vortex it in water and get some interesting effects. Now, this is one that years ago I heard about, and when I heard the descriptions of it, I was like, what the heck is this? And we don't have time for the full story, but long story short, Miracle 2 soap and Miracle 2 neutralizer and all these Miracle 2 products, they came out, when it originally came out, the developer of it said that it used eloptic energy, which is a phrase from, I believe, a man named Hieronymus, if I remember correctly. It's just another name for scalar energy or this subtle energy, this etheric energy. I like etheric energy better that Vern's calling it because scalar just, but anyway. So this stuff has been zapped with scalar energy, with etheric energy, and then it emanates it, and it has a lot of weird properties. The thing I like about it, it's non-toxic, but also the thing I really like about it is that when you use it, it doesn't leave a bathtub scum. So I only have to clean my bathtub like once a month. Now, here's a really, really cool one that people have a hard time believing sometimes. When you feed these ORMUS elements to plants, to GMO plants, it will revert their DNA back to heirloom. And the reason is because genetic modification suppresses the superconductivity and the expression of the DNA. But if you feed it ORMUS elements, it will unwind and it will regain its original pattern. And the reason is because the genetic blueprint is not in the DNA. The DNA is the carrier of the genetic blueprint. It's like the antenna that picks up the blueprint. The blueprint is in consciousness itself, and it cannot be destroyed. So whether it's a plant or a microbe or a human being, if you feed them ORMUS elements, it will heal DNA damage and it will unwind GMO damage and revert it back. And I've seen this done with 2 different products. There used to be a product online called Garden Shot, and now those people disappeared, not surprisingly. I don't know what happened to them. But they had a product. Actually, they were at the ORMES conference that Vern and I were at, and they showed me field trials that they did with all these pictures of GMO crops that had reverted back to heirloom. It was mind-blowing. I mean, like, the plant would look completely different. You know, the coloration and all kinds of stuff would be completely different. And the other company that does it, I can't tell you specifically who they are or what their product is. I'll just tell you this, that their product is in this presentation. So you take their product and you mix it with water, you put it on soil, and it breaks the soil down into angstrom and monoatomic particles, and you get this crazy plant growth. And they discovered the same thing, that GMOs, when you feed them this stuff, would revert back to the heirloom. Those people, the reason I can't say anything about them is because they've had 2 attempts on their life. They went to big agriculture and said, hey, look at this great product we've got. Okay, let's kill you. The chemical industry does not want people to know about this, and surely Monsanto doesn't want to know. And by the way, one big secret Monsanto doesn't want people to know is that even if you don't feed these things ORMUS elements, over multiple generations they will revert back to their original patterns because of the pattern being in the consciousness. You know, if you take GMO crops and you graft them and regrow them several, after 5, 6, 7 generations, they will revert back to their original. There was a study done, I don't remember who, I think Vern actually knows, where there was a study done with fruit flies where they fed them, well, actually they didn't feed them, they just reproduced these blind fruit flies that had been genetically modified to be blind, and after 7 generations they regained their sight. Now, another way you can make this stuff, as I said, vortexing in a blender-like device, but if you want to do it for agriculture, you can get a vortex brewer, or you can build a vortex brewer, which is just a big vortexing device for agriculture. And you put water in there, you can put microbes in there, and then you put rock powders in there. And what kind of rock powders do you want to use? What kind of rocks do you want to use? You want to use volcanic rocks. A volcanic rock is high in ORMUS. So if you're feeding plants or whatever you're doing, work with these volcanic rock powders. If you want to know more about rock powders, there's a wonderful book called The Enlivened Rock Powders by Harvey Lyle. And also, Vern was discussing this earlier, also Philip Callahan, books by Philip Callahan, Paramagnetism and others. What they're calling paramagnetism, I'm calling scalar energy, but basically it's the same thing. You read those books, you'll understand a lot more about how to apply this to agriculture. Now, I'm lazy. I've done this. I've done all these experiments. I've made these things. I've, done last 30 years, I've done all kinds of experiments, but I'm lazy. So there's some very nice people in California who came out with a product called Micro Minerals, and it is an agricultural product for high in ORMUS. Actually, it's all it is ORMUS. It's ORMUS water. They take seawater and they vortex it through very, very strong magnetic fields. And it creates an incredible ORMUS product that you can buy off the shelf very affordably. I think a pint is like $16, and you use like a tablespoon per gallon of water. This is one of the things that I use on my sprouts. I'm going to start playing with the ancient tech stuff now that I've talked to Vern, but this is one of the things I use right now. And you just buy it, you put it in water, you spray it. If you're growing sprouts in trays, you foliar feed them, you just spray it on the plants. If you're growing outdoors, you can also feed the soil with this stuff. You get crazy growth and crazy nutrient levels. And just to give you a little story about this, Dr. Joseph Mercola, for those of you that have heard of him, he's kind of like the Dr. Oz of natural health. He's a friend and a neighbor of mine, and when I first met him, I was talking to him, and I was at his house, and he was showing me some sprouting. He had gotten all excited about sprouting because he went to Hippocrates Institute, came back all jazzed about sprouting, so he's sprouting, and he wasn't getting very good results. So just off the cuff, I said, well, just do these 4 things, blah, 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 blah. And he did it. And being Joe Mercola, he wasn't happy, I guess, with just growing good sprouts. You know, he's like, he calls me up on the phone, what the heck is this? He got insane growth on his sprouts. But being Joe Mercola, he wasn't happy leaving it at that. He sent it off to a lab and had it analyzed. And the mineral levels and the nutrient levels were off the charts. And I said, I've been trying to tell you, scalar energy, ORMUS. He finally got it. Then he got super jazzed. He's calling me up for hours on the phone. Oh my God, I'm so excited about this. I've never been so excited about anything, blah, blah, blah. So this is an easy way. And he actually found this one for me. He went out, because that's what he does, man. He's a researcher extraordinaire, so he found this one for me. Now, another thing I do, again, because I'm lazy and I'm also very busy, is I do grow a lot of food in my yard. I'm on 5 acres. I'm very fortunate, and I have a lot of room to grow food. I also grow sprouts in trays, and I also use tower gardens. And these tower gardens, a company called Juice Plus sells them. They're about $450 for the taller ones. But I can tell you with one of these, particularly using, now the nutrients that they sell with these, they are high in ORMUS elements, and they grow very nutrient-dense food on their own. So that alone is great, but you can also throw in the micro minerals or ancient tech stuff or something like that and radically jack up the nutrient levels even more. The nice thing about these is they're completely automated. We get organic. We used to grow our own seedlings, but now we get seedlings from an organic grower, and we stick them in there. And one of these towers will grow enough food for one person to eat 2 gigantic salads every day for 6 months for less than $100. So when people tell me that, oh, I can't afford organic food, bullshit. Get one of these. Now, as I mentioned, rock powders. Here's some of my favorites. Azomite. You can get this all over the country. You can go to their website. You can find out who the suppliers are in your area. Jersey green sand, which interestingly enough doesn't come from Jersey. It comes from Texas. I think it used to come from Jersey, but at any rate, Jersey green sand is a really good one. I think it's also known as rhyolite. Redmond minerals, they've got minerals for livestock that you can use to feed your plants. All volcanic, very high in ORMUS. You can also vortex these. I do all kinds of stuff with these. I don't just feed them to plants. I don't do just what they tell me to do with them. I start thinking like, man, what kind of diabolical stuff can I do with this? So you can vortex them in your vitalizer. I put azomite and all kinds of rock powders and my supplements and everything else in my blender, in my vitalizer every day. I vortex it for 27 minutes and I drink it, and that's a rush. Now this product, Microblast, was originally developed for agriculture, but they had a bad experience with agriculture, so they started selling it as a parasite cleanse. And it's phenomenal for that. It's really weird stuff. It's like 6 simple herbs, like 2 ferns, chocolate, peppermint, a couple others. Nothing exotic. It must be real high in ORMUS. There's some kind of process they put this through. It's really weird. It's just a soap. It tastes like that soap, you know, like in elementary school, that old nasty soap, you know, in the bathrooms. It tastes like that, smells. That old brown soap. I mean, but it's amazing. You can, you know, put it in capsules and swallow it, and it will kill parasites and pathogens in the body extremely well. It actually isolates them by their protein structure and breaks just the pathogens down. It doesn't harm beneficial organisms in the body. But you can take like a tablespoon of this, put it in a gallon of water, and feed your crops with it and see what happens. There's another one called BioWash that's similar, a little different, not quite the same, but it also, you can get amazing results with that on crops. Now, another cool thing you can do is you can make your own medicines and you can neutralize nuclear fallout. That's what I'm getting ready to show you. With what? With this stuff. But first, that water, that ORMUS water that I run through in a vitalizer, I got the idea to feed it to some kombucha and water kefir. And oh my God, the water kefir grains, normally water kefir grains, the actual culture, they look like little jelly balls about the size of a green pea. And you got a ton of them in a batch. And they take about 10 days to 14 days. You mix sugar and water and these grains together, and they ferment. It's kind of like beer or wine. But you get this fizzy soda, that is a really good probiotic. And normally it takes about 10 to 14 days to make it. But when I took my Vortex water, I put some concentrates liquid sea minerals into this water, Vortex it for like 27 minutes, then poured it into my culture, and in like 4 days it was done. But the interesting thing was the grains, which are normally the size of a pea, were like the size of a quarter. I mean, they were gigantic. So this is what happens. What these ORMUS elements do is they bring energy into the process. Photosynthesis and fermentation are interdimensional processes. They're not just chemistry, and this is what most scientists don't get. It's not just chemistry. It's interdimensional physics. So, to neutralize radioactivity, there is a culture called effective microorganisms. I sell it on my website. It's like $24 a quart. And here's the cool thing. You can make gallons and gallons and gallons of it yourself. All you do is take a quart of this stuff, mix it with a quart of blackstrap molasses, organic blackstrap molasses, and 5 gallons of water. You keep it around 95 degrees for 3 weeks, and in 3 weeks you'll have 5 gallons of it. Now the cool thing is it has tons and tons of different uses. You can use it as a probiotic supplement. You can actually drink this stuff, so you can guzzle all the probiotics you want all day long. And it only takes like a couple tablespoons a day, you know, I mean, it's ridiculous. So you've got like, you know, a lifetime supply in one batch. But that's just one use for it. You can also use it, of course, with animals. You can use it as a deodorizer. These microbes eat toxins and break them down into non-toxic elements. You can use it as a deodorizer, like a carpet cleaner, deodorizer, window cleaner, counter cleaner. You can use it to break down compost faster, a compost accelerator. You can use it to remove odors in animal stalls and on farms, and it will break down their manure faster. It also disinfects. You can use it to remediate polluted water. And you can use it to neutralize radioactive fallout. Now, you can get the instructions on how to make this stuff on my website at downloads.freshandalive.com. So you can get this presentation and other presentations I've done and other information and the instructions on how to make this on that downloads page. And that downloads page is not available through the menu system on my website. If you don't know that URL, you won't be able to find it. Now, this is proof that this stuff will neutralize radioactivity. There is actually this video on YouTube, and it's on a special page on my website, radiationlinks.freshandalive.com. A farmer in Fukushima City, Japan. Everybody around him, their crops, their soil is all radioactive. They can't sell it. He used EM, spraying it on his soil, spraying it on his crops. 0 measurable radioactivity, 0. And this is showing the testing and stuff that they did. So this is what we have the power to do. All this stuff, all the solutions to these problems that we have are inexpensive, and they're not necessarily high tech. You know, this stuff's been around for eons. Consciousness can alter matter. If consciousness can alter matter, what can't we do? We've been so conditioned and programmed with this slave mentality, like, oh, woe is me, there's radioactivity, what are we going to do? I sure hope somebody saves us. Get off your butt and save yourself. That's what, you know, when I heard Fukushima, when I heard about the Fukushima disaster, the first thing I thought was, I wonder if the United States used a scalar weapon to create the earthquake. So I Googled it, and sure enough, one of the first things that came up was the Minister of Finance of Japan being interviewed by the editor of Forbes China. And this is the guy who reports directly to the Prime Minister of Japan, saying on record, on video, that the United States had used a scalar weapon not just to create the Fukushima earthquake, but 2 other earthquakes previous to that on the west coast of Japan, in order to blackmail Japan into economic policies against China, because the United States knows that China and Russia and the BRICS alliance of countries is working to create an alternative currency for world trade. That's known as the world's reserve currency. It's what countries used to do business with. Right now, the US dollar is the world's reserve currency, so everybody's got to trade their assets for dollars to buy stuff. But we don't. We can just, if we want oil, we just print up monopoly money and go buy oil. So the US seriously doesn't want that to end. But these countries are working to end that. So the Fukushima, according to this interview with the Minister of Finance, this was an attempt by the United States to keep the dollar from losing its reserve currency status. The first 2 times that they were hit with earthquakes, they wouldn't go along with the plan, but the 3rd time with Fukushima, they relented and went ahead. So that, when you hear these kinds of things, it makes a hell of a lot more sense than the nonsense we're told through the mainstream media. Now, I use these things, as I mentioned, growing. I grow outdoors with all these. I have my scalar wave devices where I'm growing food. I've got them outdoors and indoors wherever I'm growing. I've got scalar wave generators. I've got ORMUS elements using on all this stuff. I get crazy nutrient-dense food. I'm so used to eating this stuff. I hate eating out when going anywhere else. It's like when I travel, food doesn't taste like food to me. It's like cardboard. When you're used to eating food that has real nutrients in it and all the chemicals in it that it's supposed to have in it and the energy, it's like, man, you get spoiled. It's like going to Whole Foods. I call it whole frauds because it's not really food. It's, there are organic farms that are learning about this stuff, and certainly biodynamics know about this stuff. But, even organic food is no assurance that you're going to get nutrient-dense food. It's not even an assurance that you're going to get stuff that's not radioactive. So you need to know about these things. But at any rate, you can grow tons of food. Even if you're in the middle of Manhattan on a high-rise, you can grow tons of food right next to a window. So that's my presentation. Thank you very much, and I will see you all later.
Thank you very much, Ken Rohla. Well, I definitely think you are very in tune with that quantum field you mentioned. If I could just take 1 second to give an affirmation to something you said. I give a presentation called 3 existing technologies that would absolutely revolutionize the world, and the very first one that I speak about is the proper and systematic application of effective microbes into health, agriculture, and industry. So absolutely, I think this is on key. And the other deal, an affirmation about that, the idea of the Fukushima earthquake being an actual scalar event. For 3 days before that actually happened, a good friend of ours was actually, her daughter was actually dreaming about the dolphins and whales dying in the ocean, and then the next thing we know, the earthquake hit. And what they don't talk about was that there was a lot of die-off and whales and dolphins that were discovered dead after the fact, so which shouldn't have happened if it was a naturally occurring event.